Okay, so I've got Stephen Fluin with me, who's the head of DevRel at Angular. Can you tell me something about like what you do and how that came about?
Sure. So there's really two core missions. So the first is to help developers and organizations be successful with Angular, and the second is to understand what it's like on a day-to-day basis for real Angular developers, so that we can reflect those needs onto the Angular team to make sure that we're making the right sort of product decisions.
Okay, cool. And what's your like regular day? Do you have a regular day?
There is no regular day, but oftentimes I'm flying around the world to speak at different conferences. I'm working with a lot of our GDEs, so we have a really great program called the Google Developer Expert Program, where we kind of certify people as being experts in Angular, and so that when they're speaking, when they're traveling, when they're blogging, they can say, hey, the Angular team has kind of acknowledged my expertise and my impact in this area. A bunch of other things. So we do a lot of partnership relationships. So we want to kind of reach out to the community and build better experiences for developers, such as with Progress and NativeScript. And then also working with a lot of kind of large companies using Angular. So whether it's billions of users, thousands of developers, those sorts of problems, they end up having a lot of similar solutions. And so we're trying to create communities around those things.
Okay, cool. And do you have like a favorite part of the world where you like to travel?
No, I would say the favorite part of the world is the part I haven't been to yet, maybe.
Okay, so it's pretty much like as soon as you get there, it's like, oh, it's not my favorite part of the world.
Maybe not quite so bad. So I mean, I worked for many years with a company that has a lot of developers over in Bulgaria. So that's one I've been to a bunch of times. So seeing the big Telerik sign, seeing the now Progress, seeing the big MentorMates sign, which was the company I used to work for. That was always a lot of fun. So I hope to get back there someday.
Yeah, we should get you back there. Like, come in summer, right? Like it should be good,
yeah.
right? I mean, I don't live in Bulgaria, but I'll make it there. That'll be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And then, so actually, you mentioned partnership and like the stuff that you guys were working on with us. Like, what can you share so far? Like, what's your take on this relationship?
Oh, on the Progress Angular relationship?
Yeah, and how you work with NativeScript as well.
Sure. So, I mean, there's kind of a lot of different pieces because Progress does a lot of things, as you know. Really, maybe on the Kendo side, we're really looking to make it easier to build component libraries, and like, because Kendo has a fantastic philosophy, a lot of customers, and so we want to make it easier for people using Kendo and for the people building Kendo to be taking advantage of all of our best practices, stay up to date, to help their users stay up to date, those sorts of things. On the NativeScript side, I think the number one thing we care about is having a seamless end-to-end experience, and so you can use Angular, you can add NativeScript to it, and then kind of do both of these things without having to worry about, oh, I need to go get this third tool and add it to my tool chain and then kind of manually rewrite things. And so one of the changes upcoming in V6 that we've been collaborating on has been all about ng-add NativeScript or whatever that command ends up being, so that you can take an existing Angular application and add in NativeScript toolchain to it, so that I can build for the web, I can build for native mobile in a very seamless kind of cohesive way.
Cool. And I mean, like, so you actually also mentioned Kendo very quickly and like helping out. So do you think actually going with the CDK approach to building the component is like the best way to build third-party component?
It depends. So I mean, there's a lot of component authors out there that are doing fantastic jobs building out their own libraries, and many of them have already solved some of these problems. But our hope is that using the CDK, if you haven't solved those problems yet, we can solve them for you, or we can solve them in a standardized way that we're going to continue to maintain to try and make it easier for other people to build their own component libraries.
I'm kind of actually also trying to think like how could we use some of the CDK for NativeScript itself, because it's not exactly web, but some of the ideas should be transferable, right?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of, if you think about the behaviors that are offered by the CDK, whether that's like an overlay or accessibility or bidirectional, there are equivalents of all of these things on Android and iOS that I don't know if we're taking advantage of those yet enough. And so maybe there's some opportunity there where maybe there's a NativeScript CDK, bringing the native kind of philosophy and ideas and understanding that NativeScript has into that ecosystem. So you're used to using the Angular CDK, maybe you're using the NativeScript CDK on mobile, and we're swapping between those automatically.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some idea brewing there, like that we should try to follow. And so there's been a lot going on in the Angular world, like over the last 12 months. And what would be like your favorite like new things that came up in that time?
Oh, see, I lost a little bit of touch with the what it's like developing out in the real world, because a lot of my day for the last few weeks has been focused on our upcoming version V6. So while I think a lot of people here are excited about the things we've released, I don't know, over the last 6 months, I mean, the CLI has been huge in terms of like the way that it's making best practices easier and easier to adopt. I'm really focused on kind of what's the next thing that we're going to do for developers. So we're really, tomorrow I'm speaking about Angular for designers and trying to kind of put out an olive branch to designer communities and say, hey, we want you to work better with developers, and we want to kind of encourage more collaboration, build better tooling for you, really make that better. And then, I mean, all the things that are coming in 6, I'm really excited about. So ng-add, ng-update, all these kind of things that just make the Angular experience that you're used to more cohesive, more complete, more powerful.
Yeah, I mean, because I also like noticed like with V6, there is a whole thing of actually you have a workspace and then you have individual projects,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
It's like, is that already defined of how is that going to more or less work? Because I'm really curious about that part.
Sure. So today you have angular-cli.json file where you can set up multiple applications, but it was a very inflexible format, and it didn't make a lot of sense to people. Like they're like, oh, -- app equals 0, because it was the first in my config. So we redesigned the CLI config and kind of the Angular config in this angular.json file, where you have a set of projects. Each of those projects has a set of targets, and then each of those targets has a configuration. And so kind of out of the box with a V6 application, you'll have probably 2 projects. So you'll have your project and you'll have an end-to-end project. And then you have configurations. You have targets like production, development, and then configurations underneath that. And so if you give V6 a try right now, which is in our state, release candidate stage, you'll see all of those things kind of will automatically update your config for you, and you'll be able to take a look at those. And then when you add on other features we're releasing, like the ability to generate libraries, we're taking advantage of those best practices in that library, and you'll see that. So you'll have like a projects folder, that's where the library will go, those sorts of things.
And they will all pretty much be managed like from the same kind of as a one workspace.
Yes.
I think that's a big change in a way, but it's like something that we've been needing for a while, right?
It is. I think what's happened is that Angular apps have gotten more and more complex. So I met a company a few weeks ago who had something like 170 modules in their apps.
Wow.
So the apps that we're building today are much more rich, much more sophisticated than 2 years ago when we were first announcing the new version of Angular and things like that.
Nice. What's next?
What is next? You tell me.
I should do. Oh yeah, the architect. So how much do you know about the architect? Because that's something that is like coming around.
Sure. So what you call the architect really it's just the CLI, but it's a CLI that we've designed to be more flexible in terms of offering these workspaces and the ability to have the project target configuration, where you can actually customize those things in a way that we hope will be very extensible for different companies, being able to do things like have maybe an elements build, have a universal target, all these sorts of things in a more cohesive way. And so the underlying rewrite of the CLI that we did for the build system enables kind of this very configurable way of building apps and libraries and tools.
And does that mean that I could actually take architect and like make my own builder for NativeScript or for like Electron or anything?
Yeah, I mean, so you can definitely patch into that process. So the idea is that you have more control over the configuration and the build steps that are being executed, but you're still able to run it all from one place, all in the CLI.
That's pretty cool. So the other thing is like moving away from technology is the community itself. Because I'm always really amazed at like how great the Angular community is. And what are like the things that you do consciously that to keep it going this way? Is like what's the trick?
Sure. I think there's a lot of things, but maybe one thing I'd call out is that we explicitly include community as part of our values. So when we talk about kind of what is Angular value, we talk about applications users love to use, applications that developers love to build, and a community where everyone feels welcome. And so this is kind of really, really critical to us because, I mean, based off of our AngularJS experience, where we had kind of millions of developers, we had this huge ecosystem. The only reason we were successful is because we were able to create these API services that other people can contribute to and kind of carry the torch forward. Because we're actually a relatively small team where we can't do everything, so we try and do the things we do very well, and then create space and create areas that other people can contribute. And so schematics is actually one of those things that we're really excited about, where we want to empower the world to be building their own ng-add, ng-update schematics in a way that maybe you don't have to contribute back to Angular, but you can still have a huge impact on the world by doing these sorts of development.
And then from the community, like, how can we help you more? Like, what are the tricks? Because some people, like, let's say, especially if you're like very new to open source, it's like really tricky.
Sure.
So what would be your advice or call for help?
So it depends on the perspective of the audience. I mean, if you're if you're just a single developer or a developer on a team who doesn't have a huge access to a community, I'd recommend just start one. I mean, it sounds easier, or I'm describing it like in a very simplistic way, but it actually isn't that hard. We see lots and lots of companies have created kind of internal meetups focused on front end, focused on Angular, to try and bring developers together in a way. And it doesn't have to be big, right? You don't have to go out and get a space, and you don't have to go out and plan an event and set up a meetup account. Really, it's just bring developers together, right? Like send an email, put something on someone's calendar, start with 2 people, grow it to 4, and kind of grow from there. If you're already connected to one of these communities, I'd really just say, like, be open to it. So when you're there, talk to more people, right? Like, introduce yourself to someone at lunch that maybe you haven't talked to. I'm a big fan of this idea of, by broadening our own perspectives, by being faced with like a person that has assumptions that are different than ours, we're all going to be grow and improve and be more effective at everything we're trying to do.
Oh, that's cool. So, and then now come back to more personal level. Like, what do you do when you're like not being techie, when you're not involved in the technical world?
So people keep asking me that, but I'm always techie. Like I literally for 15 years of my career, I would go in and I would manage teams and lead developers and designers, and I'd go home and build stuff. I'd go and build apps, startups, these sorts of things. So I really do enjoy building applications as a hobby. Beyond that, I'd say traveling. I mean, I'm in kind of the perfect role to get a chance to both see the world and work across the world with a fantastic kind of international community. Okay, cool. And the final question, your favorite 80s movie? My favorite 80s movie, that's really hard. So so one of the things that they had at NGConf this year is little pins that you grab for yourself. The 3 pins I grabbed were Flight of the Navigator, 16 Candles, and Care Bears. So maybe Flight of the Navigator. All right, that's a pretty good answer. All right, thanks a lot, man. Thanks so much.